mentor and let me know when you're ready. Okay. We'll wait for Sarah to jump on and then we'll get started. There she is. Oh, look at her sporting her color. I love it. Hi, everybody. So want to welcome you to Diversity Dance Festival, Dance and Color Forum. First of all, I need to thank our sponsor, Anderson-Madison County Visitors Bureau. Thanks to their support, this is a free event. Give them a round of applause. Thank you. So, part of this is to give, access free and without charge to a variety of events for the community, for the campus, for our faculty, for all, everyone in the Anderson and area surrounding it. But before we get started, I want to go ahead and introduce our panelists. So they're looking up at the screen, I'm looking up at the camera, and they're in the small little people in a box in front of me. So there's a lot of really weird eye contact going on here, so I apologize if it looks like I'm staring into the void and not talking to my audience directly. So you're all here and I love you. I want to go ahead and welcome our panelists. First, we'll go ahead and I'll give you their names, but then I would like for them to introduce themselves and to give us just tell us a little bit about themselves, what they do, where they're at, what they've done, the elevator pitch. So first we have Mr. Meredith Rainey, and then we have Ms. Chandra Mossthorn, and then we have joining us Ms. Sarah Sigmund. Give them a round of applause and welcome them to AU. Good. So I'm going to start with Meredith. Mr. Rainey, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your career.
Hey, everybody. My name is Meredith Rainey, like you just heard. I am a former dancer of the Pennsylvania Ballet, which is now the Philadelphia Ballet. I was a soloist there. I danced there for about 19 years. I'm now a choreographer and teacher in the Philadelphia area. I don't know what else to say. I love dance. Bam. That's about it.
Thank you, Meredith. Chandra, why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself?
Thanks, Christine. Thank you, Anderson University, for having all of us. It's such a pleasure to meet Sarah, and I get to work with Meredith. And fun fact, Christine and I were roommates just a couple years ago. But I am currently in Philadelphia.
Just a couple years ago.
Yeah, just a couple, 5, 10 max. I teach at Swarthmore College. I'm a former company member with Dance Theater of Harlem and Cincinnati Ballet and the Washington Opera Ballet. Additionally, I work with Teresa Ruth Howard for her MOB Symposium and her C2EC programs that she has. So I'm really happy to be here.
Welcome, Chandra. Thank you. And Ms. Sigmund, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. Hi, my name is Sarah Sigmund. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for having all of us. I knew Miss Christine when she was Miss Christine to me. She taught me modern dance back when I was in high school, but now I am a swing with MJ the Musical on Broadway. So I've done various different regional productions of shows. MJ is my Broadway debut. I've been there for 2 years now, which is pretty crazy. I got to do the Tonys with them. That's just been such an incredible part of my journey so far. So I've also done national tours, industrials, commercials. There's a lot of different aspects to my journey, and that's where I am right now.
I think that's a really great segue, so thank you for that, Sarah, because part of what we wanted to talk about tonight, aside from the experience of dancers of color, but I also kind of wanted to go across some of the generational lines. As Chandra stated, Chandra and I danced, around the same time. Sarah was my student. Mr. Rainey's been doing this for over 20 years, and so in dance years, dancers are kind of like dog years, so that's kind of a different generation, so we mature faster, we do a lot in a short amount of time. And, what Sarah was saying, that she does industrials and, she's done some commercials and all the things that go into production. And I know that I've crossed into that line, and that Chandra's crossed into that line a little bit too. I don't know about Mr. Rainey, but I think one of the things that's most important is the amount of outside skills and outside ventures that we have to have as dancers to make all the ends meet financially. And so, talk to us a little bit about some of the different things that you've done as a dancer to support your career, and what kind of other skills that you may not have had when you started this career that you wish you had had, or access to different dance styles, or just things you wish you had known that maybe you didn't know that would have helped along the way. But let's go ahead and just first jump into what are some of the different things we've done to piece together a living as dancers. Who wants to start? Go for it, Chandra.
I was just in New York for a week-long residency with a friend of mine and looking at artists over 40 through film and movement. But we were at dinner and we were talking about making ends meet when you're living in New York. And so I was a nanny on the weekends, and that was super helpful. Interesting fact, I found my nanny position by just walking up to a family in the park and asking them if they need a nanny. I don't think you can do that anymore. And then also I taught classes at Cincinnati Ballet in the adult program, which I really enjoyed, and it helped me hone my voice as an instructor, teaching students that were there for the love of dance and who had worked all day and kind of come in for that movement experience. And then I got certified in Pilates. So those three things, kind of like caretaking, teaching, and Pilates, have definitely woven its way through supporting my artistic career.
Right. Yeah, and ironically, I was a nanny too, Chandra, for a while. So yeah, same thing. And I don't know if that's like part of our generation, but I would absolutely just walk up to people and sell myself for like a job, like, hey, how are you? And it looks like you could use help with this. And that's like honestly how I would kind of panhandle for jobs sometimes. But I got some really interesting jobs doing that. And so I want to hear what some of our other guests have done as well. Who wants to jump in?
Well, I'll jump in. I was never a nanny, no, maybe for my nieces and nephews, but I did industrials and I did musicals. I started in Milwaukee Ballet, and on the summers I would do like summer stock musicals, and I'd do industrials, and it was odd because, like when I started, I was like just dancing and I never really considered myself a singer. I sang in the back. It was never like up in the front, but I had to carry a tune, and it was something I didn't think I could do, but it opened me up more than I thought it could. And then I started teaching pretty early on also. And it was because of that like even while I was dancing professionally with the ballet companies, I would still be teaching on the side. I'd be teaching at universities when I could, and teaching master classes and sort of honing that skill, which also made it much easier to actually do to get better faster. Because I think you get better faster when you're teaching. You just do.
I agree with that. I know I became a better dancer once I was teaching full time, and like you, I was teaching while I was dancing professionally, and I had this grand vision in my mind that I was going to get my pedagogy degree, because when I was done being a professional, then I would teach, which is hilarious. So, I look back on like the naivety of myself back then, But yeah, when I finally landed a full-time teaching job, because I was doing a lot of odd jobs before that as a professional dancer, I became a much better dancer because I became very fast at analyzing my students and then being able to analyze myself, which was really helpful. Sarah, what kind of things have you done?
In between, like right when I moved here and like in between the different summer stock gigs that I also did, I worked at Lululemon. So that was kind of fun. And a lot of the people that worked there were also theater people. So they were very forgiving with okay, like I have an audition today. Can I take the later shift? And things like that. But I do teach now a lot of master classes and things and choreography from the show. Yeah, it's more of a fun thing because thank God, like to oh, this is kind of complicated to explain, but Broadway is with Equity, which is a union, and they have like a base pay that you have to be paid. And also, if you've been with a company for a long time, you can negotiate your pay. So we're making a good amount of money, but it is very nice to have the teaching money on the side too, just because like New York is so expensive and just living is so expensive here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, going into some of the diversity aspects of our conversation. So, Meredith, you were in Milwaukee, and I know there's a lot of diversity in Milwaukee, but Milwaukee Ballet might be something different. I know when Chandra was starting out at Cincinnati, it was a different scope of environment. And so, as artists in your different generational globes that you're in, what changes have you seen in the industry, either in the past 5 or maybe even 10 years?
Well, I mean, when I started the Milwaukee Ballet, I was actually the first African American dancer that they had in the company, which I at that moment, I shouldn't say I was shocked, but I just, I was 18, 19. I just assumed, but I was wrong. And, but I have seen I don't know, for me, it seems cyclical. Like you'll see, and then it goes away, and then it comes back, and it's sort of like this cyclical sort of wave thing that happens. And um, there are definitely more people of color in dance now, and it, but there's still a little bit of how we deal with it, because ballet itself is a very, very Western, very canon. Everything is very, very structured, and it stays that way. And it's a really hard thing to buck, but it is moving. It's just it sometimes feels like it's moving at a snail's pace, but it is still moving. I still believe that it is still moving.
Right, right. How about you, Chandra?
I think so. For context, I have 3 kids, and I'm always telling them to get off their phones. But I think a benefit of social media is that many of these companies, to Meredith's point, that may be cyclically, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, like might have this forward momentum and then it kind of goes away. With social media, they can be called on that a little bit more. I'm not saying they're still making the right choices all the time, but I think what I appreciate about this younger generation is, reposting things, asking questions in the comments, and the pictures from the companies will be called upon if it's the same person as the diversity representative in that. And I feel like that goes up for a lot of arts that I've seen lately. So I appreciate that. But to Meredith's point, I was the only female identifying African-American dancer at Cincinnati Ballet. And after I left, there was one. But in recent past, Cincinnati Ballet is really making an effort to represent what people do as movers first that happen to do ballet steps, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I can see that. Sarah, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your experience.
Yes, absolutely. So I think it's really interesting because I feel like the pandemic had a lot to do with a shift in diversity and the importance of it. And like, yes, social media, like we were all on social media during the pandemic. So we could all call things out and we all kind of maybe found a voice if you didn't have one before. But I mean, Broadway is still called the Great White Way. Like, even though we do have a lot more opportunity for diversity in the shows that we're in, like MJ the Musical is about Michael Jackson. We have the Jackson 5, it's majority Black people in the show. But we do have a majority white creative team. So it's really interesting to see, especially even now going into these audition rooms and spaces, still having the diversity that you can see on the stage, but behind the scenes, it's like, who is actually creating the work, So I think that there's still a lot of work to be done there. I do think that there are good strides, but people will check you if they see that, so that I think that is a really good change that's happened.
Yeah, thank you. You talked about the pandemic, and 2020 was such a shift culturally. for everybody, and it was a shift culturally. I think there was a huge spiritual shift, and I know there was a racial reckoning that happened nationwide during that time. I think it's really interesting that you point out about your creative team, Sarah. And I'm not performing anymore. Obviously, I'm in an academic environment, and but for the amount of I'm trying to think of how to say this statistic. Only 2% of professors in dance or the arts at the higher level, like the highest academic level, are of mixed race or African American. 2%. And I know that whenever I walk into a room, I am the only representative that looks like me in it. And when I hear that statistic, then I know that it's not just my environment and my situation. I know that my fellow colleagues are going through that too. Chandra, you're teaching at Swarthmore, and I know I've seen at least what they're putting out on their social media, that there is a push for diversity there, and that there's a lot going on. And then if you can tell me a little bit about that, and Meredith, if you can share a little bit about what you're seeing from the creative side of dance artistically.
Christine and Friends of Anderson University don't necessarily quote me on this statistic, but I believe that Swarthmore College has over 52% of non-white students, and they meet 100% of demonstrated need. And it's a school that really thrives on social justice and what they say they try and act upon. And so I'm very fortunate that the dance program faculty reflects what the movement of this college is. So we are very, very diverse faculty. We have very diverse dance offerings from taiko to African, hip hop, ballet, point, modern, kathak, tap, and those happen every semester. And so it leads itself to very rich conversations. In the higher levels, personally, for ballet, we don't see that diversity reflected as much, and that's what we're really working towards trying to shift. But to Sarah's point, I know it's academia, but our creative team is a very diverse creative team. So things are considered. Lighting for everyone who's on stage is considered, and that's not an after effect during the tech rehearsal 2 hours before the show. Sound choices, how we're placing different forms next to each other, and what that does for a visual palette, for an audio palette. Those conversations happen at the very beginning of the semester. Just every place has room for growth, but I appreciate that we are able to have those conversations.
Absolutely. Meredith, what can you share about that?
Well, I also teach at University of Arts, and I sometimes teach at Swarthmore also with Chandra. And there is at University of Arts, the faculty there is quite diverse as well. But if I'm speaking about in a company artistically, there's not a lot of color in the people who are making the decisions, right? And what it feels like it's like, okay, if we show it, it's great, but the back office is it can feel as if they're putting on a show, you know what I mean? Or they're performing it. And sometimes it's really hard to reconcile that, because there are people who are doing the work inside and who are not people of color, who are actually doing the work, but it's hard. It's a hard thing. It's a hard line to navigate. Being a Black choreographer in the ballet world is really, really hard, especially if you came from that ballet world, which is kind of odd, because what will happen is they'll bring in Black choreographers who've done modern, who've done jazz, because they want them to bring their Blackness. But it's as if the Black dancer who built, studied ballet, they don't have the Blackness or something. I don't know, but that's how it has felt. And it is, whether it's intended or not intended, that's how it comes across. Like, you as a Black choreographer, there are times when you feel like you're being asked to perform your Blackness instead of just creating work, and that is something that I deal with like on a personal level, like I have to ask those questions of myself every time I get commissioned to do something. It's like, why am I here? And that's something that I look forward to not having to ask.
Exactly, exactly. Do you feel like, and Sarah, you can jump in if you have something to share. I'm not trying to like exclude you from this part of the conversation, but because you've been a part of the classical world too. So what you're saying, Meredith, is sometimes they're not bringing in a Black choreographer, a Black ballet choreographer, because they don't feel that person's going to bring the Blackness. But is that an indictment on themselves with the fact that perhaps we've had to whitewash ourselves to an extent to survive in the ballet classical world? Is that something that you ever felt and I'm not talking about recent years, but I'm talking about, those of us who were dancing in like the 80s and the 90s when things were a little bit different, when you were the only person in the room and you were code switching to a degree, to blend into the room because that was expected of you and that's how things were run. Is it an indictment on themselves that they know how things have been run, and so they don't think a Black choreographer who does ballet can bring a level of identity, cultural identity, into the piece as well?
Well, I guess it could be an indictment of them, but I also wonder why that has to be. Like, why is it that that they need me to bring my Blackness to the work? I was like, I'm Black, and that's my work.
Right.
I've had discussions about this with other choreographers who we're really close friends, and we talk about this, and I just get to a point where I get like really I get heated. I get really heated, and I try to pull it back, and I'm just like, well, as somebody once said to me, you don't have to do anything. You're being political, just being Black and choreographing, period. You don't even have to try. No matter what you do, it's going to have that tinge on it, right? And you're being radical in like not exploiting your Blackness, because there is that could happen.
Right, right. That's a really interesting perspective to have brought to you. That's kind of crazy. Who else wants to add to that conversation? As far as because there's we could unpack this all night. We could unpack the European cultural aspect and how it's just kind of bled down in through the generations. I think the most important thing to note is that we are changing. There is a definite huge shift, but how we just need to keep like pressing forward, and how can we do that, and how can we attract more diversity, period. I don't want to like box it into dancers of color. I want to talk about dancers who are looking at their identity differently, and there's so much going on in the ballet world that is blurring the lines and opening up how we're identifying ourselves as dancers, that is no longer just male and female, and opening those words and conversations pedagogically into our schools and our university classes. Thoughts on that? Go ahead, Chandra.
Sarah, I see your wheels turning.
My wheels are turning, but you can go on ahead. My wheels can keep turning.
There's a lot of wheels turning right now.
Christine, I wanted to jump back just based a comment that you made and kind of jumping off what Meredith made. I'm writing an article right now that looks about like how our histories affect our pedagogy. And in doing that research, I realized, but I knew that my upbringing as far as like the neighborhood I grew up in was extremely diverse. I was on the east side of Cleveland, and then I went to School of Cleveland Ballet, and for ballet like higher education ballet training program, it was extremely diverse. And so what we were called upon was how hard we worked, how much turnout we had, how much, right? So it became less about our identity and more about like our artistry, our passion, our hard work. And so I think I'm fortunate that I could carry that with me because yes, it was you and me at Butler, but then there was also Thad and Luis and
Nikki.
some other James and Nikki, right? So granted, and maybe it felt bigger than it actually was if I stepped back percentage wise. But maybe because I had that base, I entered the space with like, okay, I want to be a professional dancer. And I don't mean I did not notice like who was not around me. But I think having you as my roommate, it was just like, well, of course, we're dancers.
Right.
So that was one thing. And I want to jump back to what Meredith was saying about that there are some organizations that maybe are not BIPOC executives, but they're doing the work. And I'd love to point out Pacific Northwest Ballet.
Yes.
Ellen Walker and Peter Bull are doing the work. And their company is reflective of that. Their choice of programming is reflective of that. The energy in the space is reflective of that. And I know personally how much work they're doing, and I know a fraction of their work. So to your point, Christine, there's a lot of work to do, but also to Meredith's point, it is interesting when you see people really owning it and putting the work first. Sarah, you're up.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I guess going back to the just diversity in general, I think that there's just so much space, especially in the theater world, which is majority of what my career has consisted of. And especially recently, there have been a lot of non-traditional casting. So like casting people of different gender identities than the original casting would have been, and we even had like, if we're talking about differently abled people, there was How to Dance in Ohio, which I never saw, but it was majority people that were differently abled. But yeah, just there's so much space for it in theater specifically, and even in The Outsiders. Like I just went to go see The Outsiders the other day. I have a lot of friends in the show, and I never read the book. I know that it was required reading for a lot of people. Guess it wasn't for me, but I did see the show. It was great. But they had the Greasers and the
Socias.
The Socias, thank you. And the Greasers are predominantly men. They're all men in the show, except for one, and it's Tilly. And I'm pretty sure she identifies as female, but she really embraces her masculinity. And she just like, the way that she moves, it doesn't really matter that she's not a man. Like it's more about the movement than like what you are, it's really just about that. And I think that there's so many different shows right now that are doing that really, really well.
Yeah, I am so encouraged by what I'm seeing with casting lately, and in so many aspects of the entertainment industry, and also encouraged because Chandra mentioned, well, no, actually you just mentioned it, Sarah, the differently abled. I'm affiliated with a studio that has a dance abilities class that is, shooting through the roof right now, and they're going to be expanding, access for the differently able dancers, and it's really exciting to see that there is this huge shift going, but then at the same time, because we talk about our kids. Shauna's got kids. I've got kids. We both have daughters who dance. Okay. At the same time, I have a daughter who's getting ready to do a recital, and it was just a blanket, ballet dancers are wearing pink tights and pink shoes, right? And so it was just blanket. And so I got her the pink tights, and I got her the, of course she already had her point shoes, but, I'm sitting here and I'm going, why couldn't some consideration have been made in that area? Was it really necessary for this costuming to have pink tights? Or could this costuming have gone with, tights that matched her skin tone and shoes that match her skin tone, and so you're seeing, I'm encouraged because I'm seeing changes in the industry, and I'm seeing huge steps forward in casting, and I'm seeing huge steps forward in all body styles and all types, and I'm seeing huge steps forward in all abilities dancing. And then every now and then there's this one little like pin that gets kind of thrown at you, where it's like, am I being, and this is my question. Am I being hypersensitive, or is it something that I just shouldn't be sensitive to? Thoughts about that? Yeah. Okay. Okay. We got all the hands going up. Just start talking. Just start going.
You are not being hypersensitive.
Thank you, sister. Thank you.
About 4 or 5 years ago, my colleague Olivia Sabi and I in the dance program at Swarthmore said that every student will wear flesh tone tights. Every single student. Because what we were finding is there's now maybe some more offerings of tights. And 5 years ago it was more tights. Now we're seeing a few more shoes and things like that. But it also became another form of othering, in my opinion. If there was only maybe 1 or 2 brown skinned dancers in the room and you're saying, oh, definitely you can wear flesh tone tights. Everybody else has different tones of skin, but yet only these 2 dancers, right? Or 1 dancer. And so you're also now putting them, it's another way of othering.
Yes.
And so we did not like that. And so everyone wears flesh tone tights. And what I appreciate is that everyone has to figure out trial and error. Everyone has to pancake their shoes before you go on stage. And then our tech team has to light everyone on stage.
I love you, girl. Thank you so much for that. That is lovely. Meredith, you wanted to jump in and say something?
I just wanted to say, I think one of the reasons why you keep getting hit with a pin is because ballet is the oldest thing. And sometimes the oldest thing is the hardest thing to change. Right. And it will keep, I don't want to say rearing its ugly head, but it'll keep rearing its head up, trying to get back to an aesthetic that it established so long ago, because that's what worked. And which is why I am so heartened by what Peter Bowl, what they're doing at PNB. They're showing how it can work. It just takes people to be, and it sounds so stupid to say this, but it takes people to be brave. I don't understand it. I don't think it takes all that much to be brave. Just make everybody be in flesh tone. I mean, like, how hard do you think people are going to actually revolt if you do Swan Lake and all the women are in flesh tone shoes? And do you think they're just everybody's gonna be like, oh my God,
I'm leaving. I'm never coming back.
Right.
No, right. Yeah.
And so, like I said, I remember saying this a long time ago. It's like, it's going to take somebody being brave to do it, to just do it. And when I watch PNB, I'm just like, they're not asking about it. They're not talking about it. They're doing it. And it's just so refreshing. And that's where I find my hope. But, it trickles down. It has to trickle down, unfortunately. It's not something that will just be like, okay, now we're all going to do it. Because there's people who are still holding on the old way, and,
Right,
well,
right.
Sorry, can I just have one comment off of what Meredith said for the audience to feel the gravity of what PNB is doing, is because they were at the antithesis years ago. It was a very, very tall, specific, very, very thin, very fair body type with very specific physical attributes. And so they have now tipped it. So if they can do it, everyone can. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
No, but and then Sarah, and I'm going to let you in, but it's the same thing with that's why Misty Copeland was such a big deal. She wasn't, yes, she was the first at that company, at that level, at that pinnacle, but she was not the first Black ballerina to be in a white company, but the big deal was she was the first Black ballerina with some curves and some serious muscle and some darker skin to be in that company at that level. And so that's why that was such a big deal. She was far from the first, right? Sarah, what were you going to say?
Oh, honestly, I think I was just going to say that being in a Black show for 2 years, I think I've gotten really spoiled, because they do, even though we might have a majority white creative team, they do a great job of inclusivity and like lighting and working with us to see what we need. But I did recently do a workshop, like it was like a 6 week long workshop, and I've been in the part of the process now since the first lab that they did like last year. And it's gonna probably make its way to Broadway next year, which is really exciting. But I remember seeing the cast list, and I was like, I cannot be the only Black girl in this show. That is insane to me. Like, it was so crazy to see, because I was just like, you would think that like now it wouldn't be like that. I mean, there was another woman who was a principal, but I was the only woman in the corps, in the, ensemble. So I kind of was like, oh, this is really interesting. And I was doing double duty at the time. So I went there during the day, and then I went to MJ at night. And it was such an interesting experience, because it wasn't like there was anything, like we didn't have tights or anything like that. Like we did do like a production, if you will. At the end, we did 5 different showcases of it to see what the general public would think and like what we should change. And they also had surveys at the end, and it was a lottery system, which is really interesting, because they really wanted the like general public to see and experience this show before they bring it to Broadway. But I did get to, a couple of my friends did win the lottery, so they got to fill out the thing at the end, and they were like, girl, the first thing I put was more diversity, because that was nuts. And I was like, yeah, it is kind of crazy, right? Like, I know you were searching, I was searching, and I was there. Like, I got the job, but yeah, it's really interesting. It was really interesting to see, for sure.
Yeah, that is unusual in like what we were just talking about, all the shifts that are happening, and then you go into a show when it's like, okay, now this feels really weird and awkward, whereas there was a time, I'm thinking back, because, like Meredith, I had to do some musical theater, I had to do shows. I never thought in a million years that that's something that I would be doing, because I don't sing, but I sing well enough to blend, right? Right. And so, but there was a lot of times when I was the only one in the corps, only one in the corps who looked like me, which at the time was not unusual. But then also there was all these times when I was given very exotic headdresses and very exotic costumes to wear, because I was the only one, right? Yeah, because I was the only one. So, I mean, I'm grateful things are changed. So it's very unusual for you to have walked into that situation. Yeah. Very unusual. Like, go ahead, Shonda, are you going to say something?
I was just going to say, I've heard you sing. When we went to a Prince concert, I've heard you sing.
Oh, girl, don't tell anybody about that.
Sorry.
Yeah, that was joyous exclamations. I wouldn't call that singing. That was, yeah. So yeah, don't tell anybody about that. I don't sing, disclaimer. But I'll blend. If you give me some notes, I'll blend well. So how can we change things pedagogically? It's like, there's the situation, like I was just saying with, my daughter's ballet thing, and I'm not going to rock the boat now. I found it so ironic, though, that they were asked to wear flesh tone tights under their modern outfit, but not flesh tone tights for the ballet outfit, which is like, okay, yeah, cool, and then no one can even see like the flesh because they're wearing pants, it's like, but anyways, so what is the job of the parent? What is the job, of the parent to talk to their studios about that? And then we have a room full of, up and coming performers and teachers and people who are going out into the world. How can they go out into the world and start to make these changes so that, a parent like me doesn't have to say something, it's just done. Meredith, you said just be brave, right?
Yeah, I really think it is just, I've said this to students that I've like by mistake offended or something like that. I was like, and I always apologize if I offend someone by mistake. And I always say the easiest thing to do is to speak to power respectfully. Mm-hmm. Just go up to them and say, I would really like you to think about this and how this might make me feel. And if we lead with curiosity, like, I wonder if I actually say this to you, if this would help, then I think it's easier to create change. I think when we lead with ultimatums, we lead with a lot of fire, which performers do, which parents have, because they're your offspring, they're your children. You're gonna have fire, right? But if everybody were to lead with more curiosity to like, how could I make this better? Like, if I just said this to you, would this make this better? You know, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But at least you have said something, because it is really easy to not say something, or to say, I'm going to wait, or like maybe now it's not the right time. But I always think when you see something that's really, you need to say it in the moment, you know, but do it respectfully. You know, you say, I'm not sure if that is, you know, I'm not sure if we should be doing this, or, you know, I think that's one of the ways, especially as a parent, because one, you're paying. I notice you're paying for it, right? If I was paying for it, I want to be served in the way that I think I want my child to be treated well. I'm not trying to get my child to be treated better than anybody else, but I'm trying to make the situation good for everybody. You know what I mean? So.
Right. Other thoughts?
I think I would just say, yeah, don't be afraid, going off of that, to advocate for yourself and for others, and just to lead with respect in every aspect. I think everybody could benefit from that, both sides, if you're coming from a like parental perspective, or if it's like you at your job. Like, yeah, I think just advocating for yourself in a respectful way.
Yes, I would say, going off of what Meredith and Sarah said about advocating for yourself, and advocating, like, so for example, what maybe some of the audience members might take away from today. Let's say that you're in a conversation and someone says, oh, ballet can only be done in pink tights. Like, having the bravery to say, I'm not sure that's true, you know, and each person's going to approach that, but like, using your knowledge that you're gaining in these situations, in these academia situations, especially, you know, based on the audience we're talking with right now, and use that knowledge to forward the conversation. I've recently noticed a lot of liberal arts schools are trying to remove ballet because it's such a problematic history. But what that does, I think it actually keeps it antiquated, right? Because then you're not coming up against these conversations. You're not coming up against, wait, we shouldn't only have brown tights or flesh tone tights for modern. Why? What does uniformity look like? Uniformity means that we're all on the right leg with our left leg at 90 degrees. It doesn't mean we all look alike. And that there's a cohesiveness of movement quality and artistic approach, but we're not like identical. Because even if we're the same skin tone, we're not identical. We don't approach it in the same way. So I think having the bravery to speak up in small conversations, and then because of that, and because of this programming that you're putting on, Christine, we're going to then consider the places where our children are, consider the places where, okay, maybe this is great and the friendship's here and I can have this conversation with my daughter at home. Maybe there's a different school. Maybe it's going to change high school. Maybe it's going to change college, right? So that we don't just accept whatever someone is saying as like the truth.
Right.
Yeah, I have a friend, her name is Crystal Brown. She danced with, I always forget, Urban Bush Woman. She danced with Urban Bush Woman. She had this saying, and it might not be her saying, but she told me this one. She was like, small hinges swing big doors. And so if we're all doing these if we're all little small hinges, all swinging, trying to swing a big door, we can swing the door. I think sometimes what happens is that we think we have to swing the big door. We think we have to do the whole door instead of just be the small hinge, just do the small thing. But you have to be consistent with it though. You can't just like, okay, I said something once and then go back and do something completely different, right? It's about the consistency, and it's about the little things, right, that can help move things forward. I think I'm a real proponent about, like, I always have that saying in my head, small hinges swing big doors. Just say the small thing,
Right.
and see what starts to happen.
Right. And that's, you're absolutely right. One pebble makes a bunch of, ripples and waves, and they just keep growing and growing and growing. And I think that's, to look at it, one small step at a time, everyone pushing at the same time makes an effort and changes things. Moving into something different, what kind of advice, because I'm looking, we're coming up on our hour here, what kind of advice would you give for the aspiring performer? Maybe someone, who's trying to see themselves get to Broadway from Indiana here, or getting into a dance company, a ballet company, or into teaching. Is there anything special, any kind of advice you would give, any suggestions, just going on the career path here?
I think that I would say my main thing would be to put yourself out there. I think that I grew up as I wouldn't say shy child, but I definitely wasn't as outspoken as I am now. I think that I definitely came into that later in years. But once I moved here, I knew I was like, okay, girl, like, let me actually stand at the front of this class. Let me go to these classes. Let me introduce myself to people at these auditions. Let me introduce myself to casting directors. And you really have to be your own like boss, kind of. And yeah, and even with the whole nannying thing, like you have to go up to people sometimes and sell yourself in any aspect in this industry. So yeah, I think it would definitely just be like, put yourself out there and don't be afraid of no's. Saying no yourself or getting no's, because truly everything ends up working out in the end, but you just have to do your best. And then if you don't want to do something, you don't have to do it. That might not be your path, Or if you're auditioning for this one thing and you think it's yours and you get a no at the end, that wasn't meant for you. Like what is for you will be for you. That is another thing that I think that I very much, I think about that all the time.
Yeah, definitely. No doesn't change anything, but yes can change everything, So 1,000 no's doesn't necessarily change your situation, but putting yourself out there and getting that one yes can make all the difference. And as performers, as professionals, we are our own business. We are literally running ourselves as a business. I love it. I'm going to share this because like when I'm doing an email to Mr. Rainey, his email, and this, because I run a professional praxis course, Meredith, and your email tags are perfection. He's got all of his handles. He's like Instagram, boom. It's like every handle you can find him at. Here's my email, boom. Here is a link to my most recent choreography. It is just like, it was beautiful. I was like, oh, wow. So, it's like, yeah, because you're running yourself like a business because you are a business, right? Yeah. Other thoughts from the professional world?
I would say one of the things that I've found is consistency, which is actually the hardest thing because you're going to get tired. You're going to get tired, but you can be tired for one day, but then you gotta come back after that one day. You can like take yourself, you can, I got my MFA from UArts and my mentor was Tommy DeFrance. And he said to me something that I will always remember. He said, sometimes you just got to step off the dance floor. You just got to step off the dance floor sometime. He's like, but you don't get to leave the club. You can step off the dance floor, but you don't leave the club,
right.
So it's about the consistency. Like if you want the thing, you're going to have to, even though somebody says no, you're going to have to consistently keep going forward. You're going to consistently put yourself out there, and you're going to have some times when you are not going to like what you're doing, but everybody goes through that in every single field. Everybody goes through it. So we're not special in that way. And we can't take ourselves it's really easy to be like, oh my God, it's not working. I got to go sit in a corner. Well, what's going to happen now? You get to do it for one day and
Right.
get back on the horse. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think to make it a little bit easier to take the no's, like because you're going to get no's, is by putting yourself out there, but also you have to put in the work so that when you hear the no, you know that you've done everything up until that moment that you could possibly do. And like Sarah said, that wasn't the right thing for you. It wasn't the right time. Something else is coming down the line, but then you walk out of there and, maybe you're like, you give yourself your moment, you give yourself your day if you need to, and then you just go right back to it. Because in the end, you have to turn around and be like, okay, I'm happy with the work I put in. I remember I've always been fortunate to be with people who are really driven. But I do remember coming onto campus and do you remember Thaddeus Davis?
Yes, I
Christine?
do. Yes, I do.
Yes, so he has Weidman Davis Dance now. They're doing some really phenomenal work, so maybe you can look that up.
They are, girl. I've been following him, and he's not answering my emails. So next time you talk to him, give him a poke.
I definitely will.
Tell him to answer my emails.
I will, for sure. But he saw that I worked hard, but I think he saw I could work harder. And he said to me, if not now, then when? And that has stuck with me since the second week of class, because it's true. Like, if not now, then when?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's how I try. Well, you had asked before, like, about pedagogy and like pedagogical practices. And I think, and I've seen Meredith teach a lot too. I think we both try to arrive very present in the room. I know some of this sounds cliche, but if you practice it, it doesn't feel so cliche. And we acknowledge who walks in, and we have really high expectations that differ for each person, but really high expectations. And so I think that's a way of just all of a sudden leveling the playing field. You know, like Mary, maybe for Sarah, I'm like, okay, Sarah, your expectation is 4 pirouettes because I know you can do 5. Meredith, yours is 2 because I know you just got 1, right? But my expectation for both of them and how I ask them and how I teach them is the same.
Point. And I think you're right about surrounding yourself with people who are driven and positive. I find it ironic because Thad was driving you. Chandra and I lived together, and Chandra was the one who was making me feel like I got to step it up. Because, like, you know, we were dancing, thank you, Meredith, right? Because we would be like all day dancing, you know, at the university, and then we'd come home to our apartment, and then she would take a shower, get changed, and then she would go to class at like Jordan College of Fine Arts, and she would go take class with other teachers, you know, in the evening. And, you know, this girl was on fire. And I was like, ooh, I got to step it up. I got to try and keep up with this girl, you know. I didn't, but I tried. I tried, right? To each his own, right? You know, so it was, but I mean, it's important because it's easy to become complacent. You know, and it's lovely to surround yourself with, you know, people who are driven and people who inspire you, and people who kind of help to light a fire underneath you and to change your environment at times. You know, part of the reason that I love Diversity Dance Festival, it's not just for the students or the community, it's also honestly for me. You know, because it gets me access to new teachers and to see what they're doing, and just I need inspiration too as a teacher, because you know lots of times you're in your same you know, you're in your same track, just going, and it really helps when you can surround yourself with other sources of inspiration. I think that's important.
Yeah, I want to just go back for a second and say something about Chandra. Okay, so right now, Chandra and I are working on a work together. Chandra is dancing with me. And we're doing this duet. There's 4 other dancers, so there's 6 of us all together. We're doing this duet. And so we came to rehearsal the other day. I came to rehearsal with her the other day, and she had written out all of the steps. I can't remember my own steps. I mean, it's my choreography. And there's something about, you know, like you said, Chandra is like this driven person that will keep you. She'll be like, do the work already, Meredith. Just like, okay, I got this.
Yes,
But
yes.
it's about surrounding myself with those type of people. I'm like, she is like one of my, you know, like go-tos. I'm just like, I need to talk to Chandra. I need to get up. I need to go, you know.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it goes both ways. I mean, and Christine, the ease that you had to perform was, I still get nervous. Like, I'm upset with Meredith that we're performing this weekend because I'm nervous right now and it's Monday. But like the way that you just could command a stage, I was like, wow, that is the skill that I didn't have. And it was easy to watch you do it and then try and see if I could like grasp onto that. So I think it goes in many different ways. Like, we're all pieces of this puzzle. And we have our own accountability, but then we're also there for each other. But that goes back to what this whole conference is about. Like, what is our ownership? What's our accountability? How are we going to push forward and make changes and speak up when we can?
Absolutely. So am I going to have like access to the link to your performance for the weekend?
No.
Meredith.
The show, yes. To the,
All right.
it's in May, but no.
Yeah, but we were talking before the forum started. We were talking about dancing as we age, and this is something that's also so important because as dancers, you say lots of times. Well, I mean, I would go home or I would talk to people, and I'm like, well, I'm retired. I was like 36, 37. I'm like, I'm retired, and they would look at me like, oh, that must be nice. I'm like, no, I'm not financially remotely retired. Now I have to actually make some money so that I can someday maybe stop working. It's like the concept of I'm retired because my body feels like it's 80 when I wake up in the morning, and I have to warm up to get to my company class, then to do my rehearsal. So, Chandra, how are you doing it? Because I mean, we do need to keep moving, and I do want to see dancers of different ages on stage, because I think that's part of the diversity aspect, because diverse has a lot of meanings to it, and not seeing dance as a strictly young environment, and not seeing performing as a strictly young, you're 35 and under, so you can do this. It's like breaking those boundaries, I think, is important. So how are you doing this, Chandra and Meredith? Like, both of you, just like, physically being able to inhabit the space and creating for dancers who are not 23.
I think the hardest thing is allowing myself to be comfortable with how I move in this body in this moment. That's the hardest thing. And like I said before, like I get nervous to perform. So even when I was like feeling my best, or the role felt like it was created for me, like I got nervous on the 30-second show of Snowcore. Like that's just who I am as an individual. So it's been a real test to allow myself a little space and grace, and to say, okay, like what can I try and bring to it? And FYI, my leg will not be going above 90. So like being okay. And I'm like, but you know what? I can give a ton to, and I'm going to give some back.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And just embracing the body that you're in, I think, is hugely important.
Not easy.
Yeah.
All the time, not just as a 50-year-old,
Well, yeah, like, and I think like there was something, Chandra and I had this conversation because we're going to be performing this duet. It's part of a bigger show, but we're performing this duet at a gala separately. And Chandra was like, maybe we should have the other group do it. And I was like, no, because on this show will be ballet dancers. There'll be a group of young kids from high school. And I was like, I think there's something to say about watching mature dancers dance. I think there's something that needs to be happening more often. It's so easy to say, oh, I'm too old to move. I was like, well, you're not. You're really not. It just means we take a little bit more time to get ready. And we also, we also have wisdom in our bones.
That's it. It's like right around the time we're figuring our bodies out is around the time, professional companies are wanting us to step off the stage, and we have so much to give to the art, because you've got this life experience under you now where you're not having to try and find out how something feels to embody and roll. You've already experienced it, lived it, and there's this wisdom and experience that goes behind it that is so necessary to see on stage, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted this work I'm doing. I really wanted to be intergenerational. I mean, I think I am the oldest one in the cast. I won't be 58 at that point. I'm going to be 57 when we perform this, right? And so, thank you. And the youngest one is like in his 20s, 27, 28, and we look at each other we look at each other. He looks at me like, I can't believe you look amazing, and I'm just like, are you? Okay, you know what? Yes, I do.
Yes. Own it. Yes, own it and absorb it and love it, because that's beautiful to have the different generations on stage.
Yeah, and there's something about showing that breadth of movement that is. I've seen it done in other companies. Ballet Exit a piece where he had it was Nicola Fonte. He did a piece with Brenda Dixon Gottschalk. Brenda Dixon wrote Black Dancing Body.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
Performing.
yes.
She performed with ballet acts, and all she did was step on stage and opened her arms, and everybody went, "Oh my God!" There's something about wisdom
Yes.
in movement that is beautiful.
Wisdom and experience. I love it. I love it. We're coming up on our time, and I want to ask real quickly, does anyone in the audience have any questions for our panelists? Okay, Jillian. Jillian, there is a microphone right there.
Cool. Is it on?
It should be, yes.
Hello? Okay, cool. This question is directed to Mr. Rainey, but if anybody else wants to answer, I'd love to hear it. This is kind of like a double-sided question, I guess. What would you say was the biggest shift from working as a professional dancer into being a professional choreographer? And then the second part of that question is, are there any tips for like future choreographers that you have learned that you didn't know going into choreography?
Well, the shift was a little when I was a professional dancer, everything was done for me. The company, they made my schedule, they paid my bills. Well, they paid me and I paid my bills.
Right.
They told me where to be and where to go. They picked the costume, they did the lighting. I didn't have to buy my dance belts. I didn't have to buy my ballet slippers, right? So not having that type of support is a big deal. And I don't have the biggest entrepreneurial streak as some people do. And that's something I've had to learn, and I am learning and still learning. I think the advice I would give, I'm not sure if I have advice. I think everybody has their own path, and you're going to get there the way you get there. But like if you're going to be a choreographer, nobody's going to talk you out of it. And I can't talk you into it either. What you decide you're going to do, you're going to do, right? And you will find a way. I don't know how you're going to do that, and neither do you, but you have to know that that's what you want. The how will come. But you don't have to know how, because sometimes you think, oh, it's got to be like this. I'm going to do this. And those plans don't work. And then all of a sudden you think, I'm not supposed to be doing it. No, you are not going to know the how. You have to trust in your talent. You got to do the work. You got to study. And it's not just, my thing is, I think everybody can, I think if you're going to choreograph, you have to do the same thing painters do. You have to study the masters. You don't have to do what they do, but you got to study what they do. You got to look at it, and you got to look at it constructively, right? And you just go and see stuff and experience and figure out your way that is unique to you on how you build work, period. And it's going to be great no matter what.
Excellent.
And Meredith,
Thank
I
you.
remember Meredith, you said, and you're going to make some bad work.
Oh, yeah.
Like but you got to just keep going.
Yeah.
And then maybe you just don't visit that one again.
Yeah. You're definitely going to make some bad work.
Yeah, there's definite room for, yeah, absolutely. That's all I will say about that. Yes, you will make some bad work. Are there any other questions that anyone might want to ask our participants? Okay. I think that's it. And so we are up for time. I just want to go real quickly with each of you. Just give a real quick soundbite of what you want to send people out into the world with about life, about your professional life, about just anything. Just the one thing you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to say. Sarah.
Oh, okay. I think that I would say, somebody said this to me a couple weeks ago, just because I worry about a lot of things, but I really worry about making the right decision. And she said to me, don't worry about making the right decision, make the decision to make it right, whatever you do in your life. But I was like, oh, that's good. That's a word. So
That is a good one.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Chandra or Meredith?
Okay, I'll go. I think there's something that has been sticking with me for the past few years. I heard someone say it online, and I wrote it down the minute I heard it. And it is, when you speak what you seek, you will see what you said. That means if you speak negative, you will see negative. If you speak positive, you will see positive. If you say you can't do something, then you can't do it. So when you speak what you seek, you will see what you said. Period.
That's truth. I absolutely believe in that. What you put out into the world is what's given back to you. Chandra?
I think I can't really follow those because those are really great, but I think to say you're no worse off, like if you get a no, like you're no worse off by trying. And really like just being kind and happy, because if you're kind and happy and you try something and it's a no, it doesn't sting so bad. But I would say be kind and happy would be my soundbite.
Yeah, and you embody that. And I know Sarah embodies that just because I know you personally. And Meredith, the little bit that we've had a chance to talk, I can see that you embody kindness and diligence as well. So thank you so much for that. And I want to thank you guys for joining us for this Diversity Dance Festival. This is our last event of the festival, so we're closing the festival out, and I can't think of three better people to be here and closing the festival with us. So my love and gratitude to you all. Thank you so, so, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll talk later. Thanks, guys.
Bye.